past ministers. So if our first reader can come up.
This letter was written to Sharon. It says, my sister, Judy Dixon Palance de Amico, sent me the info about Hilltop celebration and asked me to send our family info to you. I spoke to Barb Jones Blazik to see what I should send you. So my wedding photos that have the church background are included. Reverend Zacharias married Ron Daly and me in 1959. I've included photos of our parents since they also attended Hilltop. I'm sure you are too young to remember me, but I'm Joyce Dixon Daly. Our family moved to Manaway in 1949 and worshiped at Hilltop. Judy and I both sang in the choir. I remember your parents as fun-loving people. My dad, Roy Dixon, was Sunday school superintendent for years and also taught the senior high Sunday school class. He also was one of the leaders at Cairo, the youth group that met. My mom, Ida Dixon, was active in the adult Bethany Sunday school class. Daddy died in 1965 and Mom moved to Florida in the early 1980s. She died in 2004. The Daly family came to Manaway in 1953. Len and Fran were in a different Sunday school class, but I can't remember the name. They had a son, Rich, who graduated in 1957, and Roy, who graduated in 1965. Both attended Hilltop in addition to Ron. Fran and Mom were both active in the ladies group there. Fran and Len moved to Florida in 1975 or so. Both are deceased. Judy and I both taught Sunday school. I taught the 5th and 6th graders from 1955 to 1959. I even took my class to see the 10 Commandments. We were the first ones in the new building. Ron was on the committee to have the place built. Judy was named by Reverend Headley and taught his son, but I don't remember what year. Ron and I left in 1959 after we were married, but visited whenever we were in Manaway. We've lived in Melbourne, Florida for over 40 years now, and we're very active in our church. Both are elders, Sunday school teachers, and we're on teams that brought a pastor here. Ron now has dementia, but still knows me and lives in the same building I do. Ron graduated in 1955 and I in 1956. So there are many people we know and remember from Hilltop with great affection and love. I'll get the photos in the mail to Barb, hopefully. Hugs and blessings, Joyce Dixon Daly. These are memories from Jim Oster. My first connection with Hilltop was with one of Hilltop's top ambassadors, Emily Waller. She worked for me at Samuel Moore. Little did I know that Emily was the boss at Hilltop. If you did not believe that, it was reinforced when you got near her church kitchen. We still all put the paper plates and everything down a certain way because Emily would get after us if we didn't. Her interest in the welfare of Hilltop was unmatched unless you consider Wally and Alfred Ramage. My next experience was Wonderland Nursery School, where Mrs. Allen was the founder and leader of 2 preschool classes. She was married to Reverend Allen, the church pastor. This program was unique in the mid-1960s. My 2 children, David and Karen, attended. Next memory was Come Join Us class. This group was a come and play and have fun while serving our church and Lord. It was large in numbers at a time when the church had many 20 and 30-year-old couples with young children. Lastly was a church choir in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Large in numbers with multiple directors, and most importantly was Virginia Hubbard, who played the organ. I'm sure a lot that brought back a lot of memories for you. These are my memories of the 70s and 80s. They're very special. We had a large congregation, large Sunday school, large Cairo and CYF. We also had a very big Christian Women's Fellowship, or CWF, and we did many things. For several years, we raised money making and selling Easter eggs. Rosella Orris made the cream mixture. Others added ingredients to make a variety of eggs: chocolate, coconut, maple, peanut butter, cherry, fruit, and others. Others molded the eggs, while Loretta Edwards coated them with chocolate. She's got a picture. After the chocolate hardened, they were wrapped in cellophane, and Emily Waller typed the labels for them. We sold them for 25 or 35 cents. Do you remember? Something.
Little ones were 25 and then it was 50.
Okay. When we stopped making them, and we met for weeks, every week, weeks, making them. And when we stopped doing it, Janet Abram continued making them on her own. And this was fun, not work. In September, a group of us went to the Ohio Christian Women's Fellowship retreat at Camp Christian for the weekend. We stayed in a cabin with all of the facilities outside. We had workshops, sang, and it was wonderful. One weekend never to be forgotten was Mildred Corwin chasing a mouse with a broom all over the cabin, while the rest of us laid on our bunks laughing. Leona Lindsay and Evelyn Park were part of the group, and I don't have pictures of it to know. We stopped going when the Potato Festival and our chicken barbecue were moved to the same weekend. Our denomination holds an International Christian Women's Fellowship every 4 years, thus called quadrennial. In 1978, a group of us met in Stowe and joined a bus group from this area and went to Purdue University to be a part of 6,000 women from all over the world getting together for 5 days. Women from each state or country wore something that denoted where they were from. Ohioans only had Ohio State emblems with a dot showing where we lived in the state, but some states and countries were very creative. They had skirts, vests, hats. It was so much fun seeing them, and a few days later saying, "Oh, I had lunch with some women from your state the other day." Our group stayed in a dorm together, but we took different classes, had different lunch and dinner schedules, so usually never were together until 9 o'clock at night after the evening service. Then we sat around and couldn't wait to share our day's experience. Sharon Davis's mother, Lois Ramage, and Barb Lazek's mother, Mary Jones, were two of the women, as was Evelyn Park and myself. I'm not sure about the others who attended. We came home very enthusiastic and shared our week with CWF. 4 years later, in 1982, quadrennial was again held at Purdue University, and 7 of us attended. Sharon Reardon, our minister's wife, Mildred Corwin, Leona Livesey, Liz Meeker, Roxy Ann Rossiter, my daughter Carol and I. Once again, being with 6,000 women from all over the world, enthusiastic, informative speakers, the people we met, the ideas we shared, made this an amazing experience. A real spiritual journey never to be forgotten through our Christian Women's Fellowship.
Hello. All right, so my first memory is from Judy Thornton, who used to be Judy Steinforth. And she wrote to my mother-in-law, Sharon, my CYF memories are extremely fond ones. Reverend Fred Zacharias, or Rev Zach as we called him, arranged for us and took us to nearby places I never would have been able to attend otherwise. We went to the Kenley Players in Warren, I think. Don't remember the show. We also went to the Carousel Theater when it was in Warrensville Heights. No dinner then, just a show. And I don't remember the name of that show either, just that I really enjoyed both. Those are the two big memories. We met every Sunday evening, and I learned songs which I still know the words to today. We were baptized in the baptistry on the right side of the altar. Choir practice was Thursday nights. I still have a terrible voice. Doris Jean Marsh was the organist. We went to Camp Christian in the summer for a week. There was Bethany class for the adults. Aunt Neil and Uncle Harry Cook, Foster's, your parents, Falls all belonged. My parents did not to my knowledge. I'm not sure what year Reverend Zach left. He went to the Christian church in Chardon. Reverend Harry Headley married Pete and me in 1963. Then he was drafted, and we eventually lived in Aurora when Pete was discharged. I'm pretty sure I transferred my membership to the church in Aurora and eventually back to Manway Center Christian Church. Our children were baptized in the church in Aurora. Thanks, Judy Thornton. This memory is from Jennifer Gillis. Barb, here are the Hilltop memories that you asked for. We started attending Hilltop when I was around 3 years old, and not surprising, many of my memories of being involved in a church is from my time at Hilltop. Here are a few highlights I accumulated over the years. My first choir directing gig was at Hilltop, and it was a challenge for me to be the director to men and women who I had known for most of my life. My husband Dave and I were married at Hilltop nearly 19 years ago, with my sister Becky as the officiant, her very first wedding. My brother's funeral was held at Hilltop, and while a terrible experience, thankfully, our church family stood by us when others turned away. The congregation had to suffer through the numerous occasions as a teenager that I played my flute, sang solos, or spoke at a super fast pace from the pulpit about camp. During the chicken barbecue, I did not want to help out in the kitchen, so I designated myself the very first chick in the pit and helped out with cooking the chicken. I could continue with many other memories, but I'll conclude with this. Hilltop and the individuals who made up the congregation during my quarter of a century of attending there most certainly impacted my life in a very positive way, and I truly believe I wouldn't be who I am today without the Hilltop in my life for all those years. Jenny Gillis. All right, and my last memory that I'm going to read to you guys is from Eric. When 2015 started, I had no way of knowing of the literal darkness I was about to go through. In early March, my battle with diabetes took my eyesight. I was down to less than 30% combined vision. My mother suggested that I show up at her church to thank all of the people who were praying for me. Sitting 4 pews from the back after being helped up the steps, I looked to my right, and all I could see was a mess of colors. Hilltop became my benchmark, my way of knowing week to week if I was improving. And eventually, I saw the beautiful stained glass come into focus out of the murk. Along with the stained glass came the people. At first, they were voices in the dark, strangers in the truest meaning of the word. Now, they are my family, though still a bit strange. Unfortunately, with the beauty of the stained glass and the people came the dreary blah of the blue-on-blue color scheme. It became my goal to give back, so getting this place painted seemed appropriate. I still get goosebumps when I remember the moment I found out that it was in fact my Grandpa Ramage who was in on selecting this blue. Even more goosebumps when I remember a full congregation in attendance as I announced that it took 40 days and 40 nights. Somehow, all of this hard work got me nominated for a position on the administrative board, and again, a head later, I took over as president. It's been my goal over my 3 years to return Hilltop to its prime, and in doing so, I have one more small memory. Though I don't remember the day or even the time of the year this happened, I always keep this close to the front of my mind. Lindsay Harper caught a quote during a sermon and from one pew up texted it to me. The quote is, "God doesn't call upon the equipped, he equips the called."
So I have a few memories to share as well, and this one is from Rachel Applegate, and she said, "So many memories I can't begin to tell them all. There's no mistake that Hilltop made an impression on me, especially as a child." I'm sorry. So this is Rachel Applegate. "So many memories I can't begin to tell them all. There's no mistake that Hilltop made an impression on me, especially as a child. After all, it was 2 doors down on the opposite side of the street from our old house at 4591 West Prospect, and was always within view, watching us, reminding us, don't be bad. I remember the bell ringing its unmistakable ring. There was more than a few times that we rushed out the door to get to church before the last toll. Every nook and cranny of the building, except of course where the bell was rung, I explored with Connie and Carolyn Brown. It was always unlocked, and we'd go in and play the piano sometimes. Later, in my awkward early teens, I'd go in the sanctuary and play the piano. I taught myself how to play the love theme to Romeo and Juliet, an absolute heartthrob movie at the time, in 1968. Miss Miser was my 2nd grade Sunday school teacher. I loved her. At the time, I didn't understand how much she loved the Lord. She gave us each one an M&M at the end of class. It was to be our happy pill, she called us, to remember Jesus and be happy all week. Miss Jones was also one of my favorite Sunday school teachers. She was the nicest adult person I knew. Generally, I felt as though I was an aggravation to adults at church, but not to her. She was so loving, I couldn't wait till it felt toward story time. I remember when Miss Chadwick spoke to the congregation one Sunday about putting together gifts for the soldiers. The main focus was socks, lots of dry socks. I remember when Heidi Larlin came and spoke to the congregation one hot summer Sunday. I also remember Reverend Healy, Reverend Bosch, and Reverend Allen. Vacation Bible school each summer, crafts, singing, memorizing John 3:16, Kool-Aid and cracker, probably graham crackers, Camp Christian, so essential to bond with other fighting adolescents under the caring eye of loving adults and fun cabin counselors. I remember the starched white cherub-flowered smocks with the black neck bows. I felt like a princess wearing one, and then the thrill of lining up on stage. Miss Brown led us. Many years later, I understood the care and detail that went into preparing those little smocks, and the devotion of Miss Brown, who played piano for us. How can I forget her name? She played for our wedding on December 31st, 1983. Loving hands sewed, washed, and ironed all of those smocks for us to wear. As a boomer, there were so many kids at Hilltop. Not only that, there were present-age grown-ups who were always watching all the kids, and there were older people too. Miss Crafts, our neighbor for a time, Mr. and Mrs. Marsh, Mr. and Mrs. Miner, Miss Chadwick, and on and on and on. We were so blessed to have kids our age, adults our parents' age, and older adults our grandparents' ages. What my years at Hilltop taught me John 33:16, the foundation of my faith, which became a reality in my life many years later after leaving Manway, but the seed was planted in Sunday school choir, vacation Bible school, and Camp Christian. Every effort for a child, no matter how small, is never wasted. Take your children to church and then ask them what they thought about it. Church is all ages, young meet the old, and the old meet the young. Love, Rachel. And this is Rossiter Hilltop Church Memories. The Come Join Us class was large and sometimes rowdy. Once a year, the husbands would plan and cook a meal for their wives. They also cleaned up after the meal. The dinners included all courses and were delicious. No hot dogs and burgers for us. The dinner was usually held in the area that is now housing the Four Seas. Come Join Us held the occasional party for making Christmas decorations, Christmas caroling, and just because we wanted to get together. I remember one time we had our Christmas meal and then went caroling. When we came back for dessert, the host's dog had jumped on a table and eaten the bowl of chocolate candies. I don't remember whose dog it was. Lois Summerlin might remember though. Fortunately, the rest of the dessert was in the refrigerator, so we could still enjoy it, and the dog suffered no ill effects from the chocolate. The early members of the Come Join Us class started nursery school that was held in the area that the Four Seas occupies. The teenage Sunday school classes were held in the house next door. Sometimes the topic went from the lesson to watch the squirrel run across the telephone line. But usually Frank was able to rein them back to the lesson for the week. Sometimes the lesson was just a discussion about what was happening in their lives and in the world. After letting others take over the youth Sunday school, Frank was convinced to lead the adult Sunday school class, which meant the kitchen. Sometimes they also had trouble staying on topic. Maybe they were older, but sometimes they were like the teens watching the squirrel run across the wire. About a year after Frank and I started to attend Hilltop, Reverend Bill Allen visited us. They needed somebody to find Sunday school teachers and plan activities. So in the summer of 1970, we got involved in the Sunday school program. Long before it was environmentally wrong, we started the Sunday school year by getting balloons from oak rubber and Rivetta and ordering a tank of helium. We filled balloons for everybody and released them in the back parking lot. I shudder thinking about that now. There were parents who trusted us to keep track of their children while they sang in choir. During one church service, Linda Oster almost came out of her seat in the choir to get Karen because she saw Karen crunch Frank. Frank put his hands up to stop Linda and later apologized because he started the nudging that in turn started the punching contest. One Christmas Eve after the service, Frank convinced Kathy and David Oros that Santa had gone by. It had been snowing and somebody had their sled out during the service. I wonder if they remember that. Emily Waller let Frank run the old dishwasher in the kitchen. He may have been the first person she trusted to run it the way she wanted. She ruled the kitchen and everything in it. He let him throw away dishes, the utensils we used, but he still thinks she went back to church on Monday to put the things back where she went. In the mid-1930s, my grandfather, a carpenter and a member of Hilltop, and my dad repaired the church steeple after a lightning strike. I don't know the exact year, but Dad always said he was about 10 when he helped with the repairs. My grandparents were John and Clara Colton. I always heard how they sat on the right side of the church in the second pew so that my mostly deaf grandmother could hear. My dad was Tom D. Cotton. We always knew when Mildred Corbin made the coffee, it was strong. Mildred was also the first woman elected to serve as an elder. When the chicken barbecue first started, there wasn't a shelter over the grilling area. We also served on Saturday and Sunday for several years. There were a couple of years when Ellie Stam and Art Foster created impromptu covers with cooking continued in spite of the rain. Art Foster and probably Stam helped install the new or just additional electrical circuits in the kitchen area. Before he did, we had to watch how many things were plugged in at once or we blew the fuses. The women in our CWF planned and cooked the mother-daughter banquet, but the men served and cleaned up. Ray Bosch would invite anybody dumb enough to play euchre. I say dumb enough because he was a very good card player. He was also a very competitive player. Thelma made pizzas while Ray beat everybody. The Bethany class, grandparent and adults, met in the first few pews on the left side of the sanctuary. Alfred Ramish taught often. And that was Rossiter Hilltop campus. So this is from Gary Jones. Okay. So he had some memories of growing up at Hilltop Church. So first and foremost is my baptism. I was the youngest in the class we had with Uncle Ray. I remember Uncle Ray telling my mom that he thought I was ready, although I was a year too young. The experience stays with me to this day. I was so nervous and excited. The feeling I had afterwards was truly unexplainable, but if I had to, amazing felt it all. The youth groups were a big part of my Hilltop life. I recall being a little jealous of my sisters and brothers that went to Cairo and CYF. When I finally reached the age, it was everything I thought it could be. During Cairo, we combined with families in our church and go caroling every Christmas season and back to the church for hot cocoa. Great fellowships and friendships were molded during these times. I was so honored to be selected for the pulpit committee representing the youth of the church. The outing and sleepovers we had were memorable, whether it was at the weekend at someone's cottage or a night at Viewers' house. I recall the prayer vigils. I remember how the hour went by so fast sitting in the sanctuary with just me and God. I would stand at the pulpit and read from the Bible out loud as if I was reading to a congregation.
I'll tell you, it's kind of hard sitting there waiting your turn. Because you know you're just going to be really relieved when it's over. Okay, so I have two things to read, but they're a little long. Hopefully they'll go fairly quickly. The invitation that I think probably all of you received to today's celebration, I posted on Facebook's page that's called Manway Over the Decades. And quite a few responses came in, not just from those sitting out there in the sanctuary, but from across our state, Michigan, Florida, Indiana, New Jersey. I don't know where everybody who responded lived, but Hilltoppers have gotten around. So the first one that came in was from Sherry Pushwall, now Jerome. She says, I remember being baptized there on Christmas Eve with my mom and my sisters by Uncle Ray. And Kim Engelhardt responded and said, I remember that Christmas. We all loved Pastor Bosch. Then James Corwin posted a simple question. Anybody remember my mother? And from there, quite a conversation flowed. Rod said, I assume your mother was Mildred Corwin, right? Yes, I do remember her fondly. And Lee Jones chimed in. Yes, I remember her. Your mother and my mother were good friends. Then Lee's sister, our own Barb Blazek, says we lived just down the road from you on High Street. Your mom was one of the first women elders of the church. Jody, who is Jim's younger sister, and our sister Jackie were good friends and graduated together. Tessa Grubb says, Jackie Jones used to babysit my brothers and I. We went to Hilltop. I believe my parents, Elaine Barbary and Daryl Grubb, got married at Hilltop. Dottie Summerall can never stay out of things. I remember you, Tessa. And Barb says, I remember you very well. I used to babysit you also. I think this is a lot of proof of the little community we live in and how interconnected we all are. Tessa tells Barb she remembers her, that she and Jackie were sisters. Debbie Luce Parton used to babysit Tessa as well. And then Dawn Lizzie Thompson says, Jim, was your mom with her? I was with her a lot through the CYO. My parents were friends with her for years. Some people's faces are memorable, and hers is to me. I can perfectly picture her kind, smiling face, even how her hair was. She came to my parents' home a couple of times for dinner. I saw her many times after high school, but will always remember how nice she was and how much I liked her. She was special. James says, thank you for the kind words. My mother was very active at Hilltop and loved the church. I just wondered if people remembered her. I appreciate all those kind words. I brought her into this thread because of the Hilltop Post, and I know how much she loved the church. While I was growing up, she was always involved in one way or another with Hilltop's mission, from the house next door, CWF, or whatever. Rod sums it up. I also remember her being vital and bringing so many Hiram students to worship because Mildred worked at the college, and getting them involved in our church in various ways. I was just a little kid back then, but I always thought Mildred was pretty cool. And that is a good final word on Mildred Corwin, who truly was a worker for her Lord and for Hilltop. Then Georgia Stackhouse, who's the wife of a previous minister, recalled celebrating our 100th anniversary. She says, I think the Record Courier came and took pictures. Possibly they wrote an article also about the 100-year celebration. There was afternoon tea and we dressed in vintage clothing. There was also a tour of historic homes in the village. I told her she was right about the article and that we still have some of the booklets that were printed for the celebration that she helped orchestrate. Hard to believe it was 30 years ago. Georgia says, yes, very true. She would have liked to have attended, but it was scheduled for a knee replacement and so wasn't going to be able to do it. Lois Summerlin told her the newspaper article was on display in our historical cabinet in the sanctuary, which is back behind the pews on this side if anybody's interested in looking at some of our artifacts. And then some other memories came in. Some of them started short threads of conversation, and some of them are just little one blip of memory. From Edie Knowlton Benner, I wish I was going to be around for the birthday party. Yes, many fond memories of Hilltop. Cairo, CYF, we had so many in our class of 79, 9th grade CYF, that we had our own group, including Peggy Miller Bainley, Doug Livesey, Kim Engelhardt, Camp Christian, Roxy Ann and Frank Rossiter's our 5th grade Sunday school teachers, Reverend Bosch. When I was little in the late 1960s, Reverend and Mrs. Allen and Sarah. I still stay in contact with Sarah, who lives in Pennsylvania. Plus, my parents were married there in 1959. Great people, wonderful church. Dee Dee Toller, I hope I'm saying that right, says, hi Dee Dee, what's Sarah's last name? I've been looking for her. I spent many nights with her when I was young. And Sandra Davis Wegman says, last I knew, Sarah's last name was something like Giancola. Mara Schmidt-Matthey tells us that her father donated an old coin set to the church for the 100th year anniversary. She too had many fond memories of Reverend Allen and Sarah. And then Tom Robert, who I think maybe was a teacher at one time, but then became principal at one of the elementary schools or the middle school, says, although an outsider, I attended Hilltop for some weddings and unfortunately some funerals of some of my students while I was at Crestwood all those 35 years. My daughter Amy actually sang at a wedding there, a beautiful sanctuary. They don't build churches like Hilltop anymore. Attended many chicken barbecues during the Potato Festival. Best chicken dinners ever. Congratulations, Hilltop, on service to our Lord God for 130 years. Still faithful and a beacon to the Manaway community. And now we hear from Lee Thompson, who says, I know my in-laws, Ralph and Leona Livesey, would love to be there, but they can't. It was their home away from home when they moved to Manaway around 1967. Leona lived for helping with the chicken barbecue during the festival, and I do think we use some of her recipes still to make the good food that we serve. And she lived even more so for the mother-daughter banquet every year. They'll want to know all of it, of course, so we'll have to find out what we can for them. And interesting, Edie, you reminded me of so many things in what you wrote, especially Camp Christian, cabin 28. I'm not sure what happened there, and I guess I'm not getting this. Sensible people remembered some of our ministers from the 1950s and 60s. Bruce Steinfurt says, I went to Hilltop Church for a few years during the mid-50s, bringing back memories. Reverend Fred Zacharias was pastor at that time. My sister Judy, who we already heard from, was in CYO. Family friend Nell Cook was in what is called Bethany class. Seemed like something was always going on at the church during that time. David Campbell says, hi Dave. I remember Reverend Zacharias. Reverend Harry Headley, who went on to Bucyrus, Ohio, married Val and me at her church in Bluffton, Ohio. And then Judy Dixon, who had written in her own memory that we heard earlier, says, was Pearl your mom, Jack your dad? Rod jumped in before Dave could answer and said, yes. Dave says, yes, they bought the house on Franklin Street where your mom lived. And then they had a conversation about that house and some work that Jack had done on it, and Dave had been there a bit. And again, more sense of us being not just this little group, but part of the community in all sorts of ways. Lee Thompson says, I don't, as far as Reverend Headley, but it does remind me of a kid I haven't thought of for years, John Headley. Any relation, you think? Dave confirmed. Yes, John is Gary's son. His sister is Kathy. He had a younger brother, Joe. You remember a whole lot more than I do. I think it's because I have so much information in my brain that some of it I'm losing. Lee, thanks. I remember John and can picture him. Seems like he moved when younger. Dave, I don't remember the year, but they moved to Bucyrus. Guessing maybe 63, 64. I think John might be in Tennessee. Lee says, I remember John maybe around 4th or 5th grade. That would be about the right year. Dave says that John and he used to run around together back then. And then Dave's sister, Susan Campbell Beal, says there was another brother, James. Joe was the baby. Harry married Don and me in 1977. Rose McGill Thomas, and I have to admit I do not know who she is, says she remembers John. We lived just a few houses down the street from them. I still remember 2 dirty jokes that he told my brother Tom and I tell them to people all the time. Interesting thing to remember from church. I suppose he never told them to her in the neighborhood and not within these walls. So, that is it about old ministers, but Rod himself had said he had many memories. I think the most impactful, though, was in 1973, shortly after we joined the church and I was finally dedicated. My dad had a massive heart attack. He was in the hospital for weeks and weeks, and once home he was unable to work for almost a year. Our church family really went into action to help us and make sure that we had food and anything else we needed, and not the least of which was love and prayer. Emily Waller once brought a huge pan full of cabbage rolls for us. Jim Davis and John Bird went to the local potato farm and dug potatoes from the end of the rows where the machines missed, and much more. And then we heard from Pam Winslow Jewett. My mom and dad, Marilyn and Ernie Winslow, were very active in the church when I was growing up. I remember going to all the mother-daughter banquets in May, and I would always win a prize for the birthday closest to Mother's Day. When my dad died, we had the church steeple lit up in his memory. And I told her I didn't know that, so now it will mean even more when I'm out at night and see that light. Rod told her we still had the mother-daughter banquet and invited her to join us. She thought since she lives in Florida that might not happen, but he told her she should drop in and say hi whenever in the area. She agreed. Mary Lou Dungan, who actually was Mary Lou Foster back in the day, says, though I was always a member of the Center Church, we always borrowed your baptistry. So that is where I was baptized in probably 60 or 61. Our youth groups would sometimes do activities together. Rod assured her that our youth still do things together. We've always maintained close ties with Manway Center and now also with Hiram. Lois Summerlin tells us that her family joined the church in the early 70s and have been active in it ever since. My children were dedicated, baptized, married, and raised their children in Sunday school here at Hilltop. My husband and my mother were buried from here. Lois has lots of little memories. We had so much fun in the Come Join Us class. We went out to eat or gathered at the church or at homes. For 2 years, she had one Friday a month a kids' night out. The parents left the kids at church at 6 and picked them up at 10. We played games, watched movies, had snacks. It was fun.
Do you want to highlight on yours if there's anything you want to highlight?
Okay, they talk about choir directors Sandy Fenn, Jenny Meeker, Meg Kuyan, Linda and Andy Parr, Ryan Delaney, and now Barb. And then people start talking about junior choir and I had lots of memories of my own. I will say that these are my memories. They're not necessarily 100% historically accurate. But the feelings the people in comes evoke for me are absolutely genuine. And I talk about Bernice Chapman and Ethel Booth and Roy Dixon, who has been mentioned before. I remember him as our Sunday school teacher. We would meet in one section of the fellowship hall. Remember how we had those accordion doors that you could section it off so very multiple classes could meet at once. And the one thing I remember that he told us was that when you are praying, if you have your hands clasped so tightly that the knuckles turn white, you are really deeply, sincerely into your prayer. And even now, sometimes when my mind maybe starts wandering while I'm trying to talk to God, I will do that and it helps me focus. So I really appreciate that. I remember Donna Winchell and Kathy Hoops and Sue Woodward and Marilyn Guyette and Aunt Holly Bramley and Jackie Mullen Brown and the Misers and the Ramages everywhere and the ministers, and you know what? I've got a lot more that I remember. But Barb, our chairman of this committee, actually plans on pulling all of our memories together. So you'll have access to the rest of my memories.
I want to thank everybody who's read things so far. We did get a lot of memories, and I'll have to say, spending time on the phone with people I haven't talked to, or people that were friends with my mom for over an hour is great. But I will want to tell you that we will have all of these memories downstairs, that you can look through them and see all the different memories. One I want to touch up on here was sent to me by Judy Bosch. She has a few memories. She was 4 at the time when Reverend Bosch came here first to serve the ministry of Hilltop. She remembers Grandma Ramage. Excuse me, I got to take these off to read. was her first Sunday school teacher. She thought she was the most wonderful person in the world. She loved all of her kids. Wally and Lois Ramage were like her other parents, and they were always supportive of the church and its activities. Alfred, Eleanor, Larry, and Janice Ramage became like family to them also. One story that I will touch on is that her mom told the story of a trip with Eleanor. Mom and Janice were in the back seat. Mom liked to chew and snap her gum. Eleanor didn't like Janice to snap her gum. When my mom snapped her, Eleanor bawled Janice out. Then Mom said that she was very embarrassed, but did own up to being the gum snapper. Other names that she brought up were, let's see, the Winslows, the Hoskins, the Durthicks, the Averys, and the Mullers. Marilyn Muller was her first babysitter, and then Reverend Bosch was here in the 70s again. This next memory, I'm sorry, brings tears. Because I sat with my uncle Okay, I'll get to it. My Uncle Bob called for an hour and a half going over memories of the church. They moved to Manaway in 1947, and they lived just catty-corner from the church. He has memories of Grandma Roberts, who was Cedric Roberts' mother, as the superintendent, and Grandma Radich being the Sunday school teacher. He has memories that I didn't even know, bazaars that went on that were in conjunction with St. Joe's. St. Joe's was across the street from here. And every year they would put together in each of the back parking lot booths, and everybody had fun with games and selling things. He has memories of Ernie and Marilyn Winslow showing movies for the youth every week. Also Wally Ramage with the youth. Earl Franks having events for the youth at his barn. Mrs. Quirk was the organist, and so was Mrs. Hubbard. Mrs. Quirk was also the choir directress, while I didn't know that my uncle sang in the choir. One special memory that he has is Eleanor Ramage and my grandmother, Helen, singing duets. And they were here before the addition was put on, and the Sunday school classes were divided by doors. And he remembers running upstairs all the time just to make sure that they could ring the bell, and they would all sit in the balcony. Other names that he remembered are Don Wee, Reverend Zacharias, and Dr. and Mrs. Odell, who was an eye doctor. And did you know that Frank Hubbard also played the accordion sometimes? He also remembers Earl Turner and Reverend Hadley. And also remembering that my parents and my uncle and aunt, and a lot of us were married in this church. Some of my memories from Don Summerlin, Benet. The chicken barbecue, putting on sandwich boards with me and her and I were walking around the potato festival just to advertise the potato festival. We had boards on us walking all up and down Main Street. After the dinner on Sunday, we could sit on the church steps and watch the parade because it came down Prospect Street at the time. We've touched on the Easter eggs and how good they are. I remember having historical celebration at the church. Maybe it was 1976, the Diamond Jubilee or something. We were all dressed up, and my dad walked around the sanctuary, bonking people on the head with a stick with the styrofoam ball at the end of it. That was supposedly what they did in the colonial times to keep people awake. Junior deacons. I was one of the very first junior deacons. I remember that being somewhat scandalous since I am a girl. Deacons were supposed to be boys at the time, but our church was always been forward-thinking and turned out to be fun. She remembers sitting in the back pew with Lori Engelhart Higgs and playing with a wind-up R2-D2 toy. We used to wind it up and tell it to walk across the wooden pew. It made quite a bit of noise, and we often got dirty looks. We weren't the only ones making noise, though, because Janet Abrams liked to eat hard candy during church, and you would always hear her candy wrappers. Dawn was baptized on Maundy Thursday when she was 12. There was a whole group of us. Let's see. She remembers with the centennial with Chris Friend Kluchar, and they worked on getting people with the historic. And she met her husband Paul here at church when him and his parents were coming. Her dad passed away in '76, and his funeral was still held here. Their daughter Emma was born in '99, and she was dedicated in the church in June of that year. And she was baptized by Jeff Jackson. She's been putting on the vacation Bible schools with P.M. Myers and I myself. and volunteers in the church. I'm just missing the mother-daughter banquets, and you will be able to read all of these, and we are comprising a book of these. My memories are really full. I also want to touch on, I received this from Evelyn Park, that actually was written by Pearl Campbell of her memories of Norman Evelyn. So if you'd like to read this, it also has pictures of how they used to bury the ox for the Ox Roast Fair in the back of the church. One of my memories that hasn't been even said is we used to have New Year's Eve parties here, where they would ring the bell 12 times at midnight and have a little service this was years ago. Our memories of being an acolyte and a junior deacon, and wonderful memories growing up with Dan Martin, the Summerlands, Engleharts, Edwardses, Stoms, Ramages, Blunks, the Livesies, the Majors, the Campbells, so many of them in my life. I would like to touch something my brother had written. He talks about his home church, who lives in Florida now, in his sermons and people that got him there today. He remembers Alfred Bramage not only as a neighbor and friend, but as an elder of the church and a teacher. I remember the lessons that were taught in Sunday school and stories, songs, and taught by Uncle Ray Bosch and Mrs. Stom and her puppets about God and the many people of our church. There was one memory that I had. I remember asking my mom, I remember Mrs. Edwards being the leader of our junior choir. And I told Mom one day, I said, I'd like to really sing like Mrs. Edwards and be up in the choir with her. He said, well, you got to practice and go to practice. So many of these memories will be downstairs for you to look at and be able to see what everybody has. And we invite you to please stay after. We have a photo videos being shown downstairs and plenty of food after we have our rock dedication. Right now, I'd like the choir has a special song.
His word, my hope. Our community hymn is the Old Rugged Cross, number 548, all verses.
At this time for communion, we practice open communion here at Hilltop, which simply means if you choose to remember the death and resurrection of Jesus, you are welcome to partake with us. Would you pray with me, please? Gracious, loving God, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the memories shared. And we thank you most of all for your love for us. which was shown in your Son Jesus and the sacrifice he made for us. Please help us to examine our hearts as we remember this time in Jesus' name. Amen.
And on the night that he was betrayed, Jesus and his 12 disciples gathered in the upper room, and they were going to have a meal. At the time of the meal, he took the bread, blessed it, and broke it, and said, "This is my body, broken for you. When you take this, in remembrance of me." And in a like manner, he took the cup and said, "This is the cup that signifies the remission of sin. Take this, all of you, and drink in remembrance of me."